Entering the season, Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona, was our top receiver on the board. Has that title been stripped and given to someone else like a Travis Hunter from Colorado? We're going to discuss this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. And you know, I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. You talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listen is greatly appreciated here over at Locked On DP. Playmaker edition, baby. You know, when we talk those wide receivers, it is official Playmaker edition episode over here at Locked On. And we're talking about wide receiver one, right? Have the conversation. Has that switched up? Has Travis Hunter superseded a couple other guys, and he's the best wide receiver and the best cornerback in the game? Then we're going to talk about those tier 2 wide receivers, right? Last year, I believe we had 5 wide receivers drafted in the first round. We have to dive deep into these guys. Who are some of these guys that get elevated like a Ricky Pearsall, right, from last year's draft? And then we're going to talk about those truly underrated players, right? Nobody's talking about them right now, but we're gonna kind of wake them up a little bit, DP, and put those guys on the map, man. You know what? Let's go ahead and get into this conversation.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Has the wide receiver one crown shifted and been given to someone else? Keep coming into the season. I think most people, I ain't gonna say all of us, there are a lot of Luther Burton III fans, and I think we're also on this pod, we're fans of this young man's game as well. But Tetairoa McMillan was the top guy for us coming in out of the summer scouting into the 2024 college football season. And for the first couple of weeks, you know, I think he kind of held that still. Travis Hunter has been very impressive, Keith. I think this past weekend was his first game. Crazy enough, like he's played 5 games, and besides the UCF game, which they won by 27 points. That was the first time all season he had not caught over 100 or went over 100 yards receiving. He had 9 for 89 and a touchdown. Every game other than that, 132, 110, 100, 130. And what we're seeing from it is just that, and it's crazy because he's doing this all while splitting time at cornerback, right? So it's like, what would it look like, Keith, if he's playing 60, like if he's playing 100% snaps at receiver? Like he gets to actually rest while the defense is on the field, right? He doesn't have to walk out there. I feel like his ceiling is extremely high at corner. He had the interception he had on KJ Jefferson. Look very similar to what he did against TCU last year. You know what I mean? Squatting, baiting the quarterback to take the underneath route and make a diving interception, right? The twitch, the explosiveness, the ball skills. But when you watch him play wide receiver, you see route running and pacing. You see explosiveness. You see ball skills. You see a guy that knows how to use his cornerback background to his advantage at playing wide receiver. For you, Keith, has a wide receiver one label or title been given right now to Travis Hunter, or are you standing pat with T-Mac?
I'm standing pat with T-Mac, DP. And just because I think he's a little bit more savvy. I can't get over the frame. I can't get over like the contested catch situation. And with T-Mac, we have to remember this guy had a 300-yard game to kick the season off, right? He said, you know what, y'all missed me. Watch this, right? He went for 300 yards in the season opener. And even watching that Arizona, they play Utah, right? It's not great quarterback play coming out of there, right? And the offense is not looking great. So I think it's affecting a lot of Tetairoa McMillan's numbers and his ability to get the football, right? So I'm still like, I'm at some point, obviously, you know, we have to do this right in the draft process, is that you have to remove what you're seeing from production standpoint, and then kind of grade the player and his athletic ability itself. And so I look at it, DP, and I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going with T-Mac. But I will tell you this, that Travis Hunter, I believe at this point, he's creating a separation between wide receiver 2. I think he's creating distance. Like, I think he's wide receiver 2 and he's creating distance. Just because I talked about savviness with T-Mac, I don't know how else to explain how much Travis Hunter just appears to have a natural ability and instincts for playing football at the end of the day, right? Like, the guy just gets it, and it's not going to show in a 40 time. It's not going to show anything. The guy just understands how to play football, point blank, period. Adjusting to the football in the air, tracking the football is so natural to him. Even I think the UCF game, he almost had another interception, right? Where he damn near turned it into the wide receiver, right? And you couldn't, like, if you just watch the play, like, I don't know if Travis Hunter was at wide receiver or corner, right? So I think he's wide receiver 2, and I think he's put distance.
No, I'm with you, Keith. I'm standing pat as well. And the reason why, for me, I think about this. One point you made, the quarterback play at Arizona is just not up to par to what we're seeing at Colorado, right? Not saying that Shedeur makes Travis Hunter by any means, but I would love to see Shedeur throwing the ball to Tetairoa McMillan. Those T's getting me mixed up, Dickie. Like, to see him throw the T-Mac, what would that look like? T-Mac getting accurate, high ball placement, high level ball placement passes. What would that look like? You know what I mean? And I think for me, that's where it does, because similar to like, and I think the speed and explosiveness is what makes Travis Hunter as a receiver so special and talented. But he's also good after the catch if you get him in the quick game, right? He's got that spatial awareness.
That's that Jerry Jeudy stuff. Like I said, I was on the sideline when he made 2 LSU players run into each other, right? Like, stopping on the dime. And it's like, oh man, this is crazy.
It's almost punt returner-esque.
Yeah.
Whereas like he catches the ball on those, like, matter of fact, it was against Colorado State. He was running a cross. He was running like a shallow cross, and Shedeur was rolling out to his right. He threw it back across his body to the middle of the field to Travis Hunter. I remember this play vividly because I watched it on tape. Hunter caught it and hit the awareness to know there was a defender running right at him, and he just jump cut him and ran around. And I was just like, to be able to go from receiver to runner was so innate and so immediate. And I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, because I thought he was going to get blasted, because I think they had another crosser. I think it was like mesh concept. So I think it looked like he was about to run into his own guy and the DB that was following him. And he just jumped, like, just nice little jump cut and juked him, got around and got yards after the catch. So it's like thinking about getting him in the quick game in Travis Hunter. But then you watch Tetairoa McMillan, and for 6'5", 220, he shouldn't be this fluid, man. And we all know that with Luther Burden, like, these, to me, these are the top 3. I don't think there's Trey Harris, which we'll talk about in coming up next in the next topic. Trey Harris has been balling, right? Has been great this season. But I don't think, like, when I look at Luther Burden, I just see a guy that you can put him in the slot, you give him the manufacturer touches if you want to, but he has shown the ability to run routes. I think Missouri's offense does hurt him, though. And, like, because he's not, like, they talked about, he's going to play more on the outside this year. I think Jordan Reed tweeted that 11 snaps outside the entire 5 games that we've seen them play. And I'm just like, what's going on, Missouri? Like, I thought he was supposed to play outside more, but it's easier for Brady Cook to get him the ball in the slot where you can dictate coverage. He's the coverage indicator. You can put him in motion, different things like that. See if it's man, give Brady Cook the answers ahead of the snap, right? So I think those 3 are solidified. I don't foresee anybody moving Luther Burden out of the fray. I mean, I will say this: now that we're in conference play, Emeka Egbuka, like, these past 3 games, Emeka Egbuka, we're going to talk about him in the next topic as well. He's been coming on late. He's been coming on as of late. 3 straight games over 90 yards receiving, and that's going to be big for this offense, getting Will Howard settled. But yeah, I think that might be the only true threat to Luther, is if Emeka Egbuka turns into the guy we saw in 2022 before he got hurt in 2023.
Well, DP, let's not dance around it, man. Let's jump straight into that conversation, man. Coming up next, we're gonna talk about those tier two wide receivers, right? Emeka Bukas and guys in that category that could potentially push a Luther Burden, right? Those guys sitting at tier two, but have an opportunity to elevate themselves. And guess what? It's an Ohio State wide receiver, right? So we're gonna talk about that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get that hunch or that urge in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you placed your bets. And talking about placing bets, guys, Thursday night football this week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to face the Atlanta Falcons. And guess what? The Atlanta Falcons are a 1.5 point favorite over the Buccaneers. So you can get in on that action right now before the game even gets here on the schedule. Right, guys, listen. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, with your first $5 bet placed, you will get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. All you need to do is go to FanDuel.com and get started on the action. Go to FanDuel.com and get started on the action. Tier 2 wide receivers for the 2025 NFL draft class, Keith. And I think when you say, okay, all right, Tetairoa, Travis, if he declares at that spot, Luther Burden, who's wide receiver for? And I think a lot of people would say from a name standpoint, it's like you got to keep an eye on Emeka Egbuka and what he's doing at Ohio State. And, you know, for me, just watching him find, like, yes, and I'll say this, then their wide receiver one right now is Jeremiah Smith, the freaking 18-year-old freshman. Like, you know, I mean, that's just is what it is. But over the last 3 games, then they had Western Michigan, Emeka Egbuka, you know, for those who don't know, 6'1", 205. He had 5 for 98, no touchdowns. Against Marshall, 5 for 117 yards and a touchdown. Against Michigan State, 7, 196 and a touchdown. He is starting to pick up steam. He is starting to get rolling. And as Will Howard understands, Jeremiah Smith is that big. He's Julio Jones. I said it when we talked about the freshman, called him, you know, did that freshman phenom episode, Keith. He's Julio Jones. And you got Julio, cool. And we know what he's going to do. He's going to bring that big play, the explosive plays down the field. Emeka Egbuka is that chain mover who has speed. So it's like, to me, you use him the way you use JSN. If I think that's how I would, you know, handle that situation. If I'm Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, I'm getting the ball in the same way I got the ball to Jackson Smith-Njigba, whether it's at the Z spot, in the slot, in motion, bunch, tight. I don't really care. I'm finding ways. Third downs, I want him to be the guy. I want Emeka Egbuka to be that safety blanket for Will Howard. And I think that's what we're starting to trend towards, Keith. And he's just, like I said, 3 straight games over 90+ yards each game. I think he's about to make a run in this offense. I think Will Howard's starting to get comfortable in the drop back game and understand where his outlets are. And with this run game of Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, you don't know which one's going to pop for 200 at any moment, at any game. You get that play action going. I think Will Howard's going to start getting the ball a whole lot more to Emeka Egbuka, especially as the competition gets stiffer and tighter in the Big Ten.
Yeah, when they have to play the entire game, right? I mean, we talked about Ohio State. This has been one of the slowest rollouts I've ever seen for a team, DP, to go. I think, 3 group of 5 teams in a bye week, right? So you didn't really play anybody until you got to week 5. So I'm right there with you. And yeah, and when you get in those tighter games, one, the guys have to play more, but the offensive coordinators, right? They focus more on getting the ball to their guys. And I expect that part to increase for him. And I expect Emeka Egbuka. Talk about tier 2 guys that can push. I want to throw this name out there and ask you, is he a guy that can push to be like, hey, I'm wide receiver 3, and that's Stanford wide receiver Elik Yamana? Do you think that he's a guy that can really push for that kind of conversation or elevating himself up there?
Oh, 100%, Keith. He is. No, it was crazy because after it was like thinking about our rankings and stuff, and I was like, man, we never put Elik in our top 10, and like I was kicking myself. I was like, Elik is one of the best receivers in the nation, and I think he's similar to to Tetairoa, Elick is suffering from subpar quarterback play as well. Like his quarterback is more of a dual threat runner than a pure passer. And he's got the young man has arm talent, but it's like, okay, can you give him those accurate passes where he can just make a play after getting the ball? Or does he have to make an exciting, outstanding grab like he did against Syracuse on the first touchdown to make a play on the ball, right? So I think Elick absolutely, when we're 6'2", 210, strong, good speed vertically, good route running, yards after the catch. Like the work he did last year was impressive. What he's doing now is also impressive when he's getting the targets. And that's the main thing, is like coming off of this Clemson game, I didn't really have much expectation for him. He got 4 for 50 and a touchdown, and I just knew that was going to be tough sledding for Elick, mainly because that secondary, that defense is elite, but then they're going to get after your quarterback, and they're going to make your quarterback uncomfortable, which they did. So I think Elick absolutely has a chance to leapfrog himself and be like, kind of like I said, that Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall was the entire process. We never discussed Ricky Pearsall as a late first round pick. We was like, top of the second. Some people said third. And then we get to draft night, and it was like, all right. Okay, San Fran. Y'all prepared for the exit of Brandon Ayuk, then you go and pay Brandon Ayuk. So, no, I think Elick absolutely has that chance to be one of them second-tier guys. Keith, I want to ask you, Kyron Lacy. Does Kyron Lacy have that ability to be one of those tier 2 wide, maybe not back into the first, but one of those like really solid top of the second round receivers? You fast forward 5 to 7 years, you're like, man, he's just steady Eddie.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough with Kyron, man. And with Kyron, you know what I think is gonna come down to, DP, a lot of his athletic testing, and see what his numbers are, right? Like where does he come in with that threshold? But when we talk about just play wise, and another one of those guys that just understands how to play wide receiver, I can see teams saying, okay, we for sure have this guy as a top 100 prospect, right? And whether he goes in the middle to the back end of the second round or somewhere in the third round, he's a good complementary piece in wide receiver too. I was even trying to think of comps for him. It's kind of somewhat difficult trying to think of, like just comps for him, just as, his body type and his frame and everything. But obviously extremely talented guy, and he's making noise as we continue to get into the season, right? And it seems like he's going to have the volume and the numbers because this LSU offense is just picking up and rolling, right? And they seem like every game is a shootout, right? Like they have to score 30, 40 points a game to win the game. And so that means that the production is going to come, with him and what he's doing.
No, 100%. And I think, he's listed, they have him listed at 6'2", like 210.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's probably, he looks like he might be closer to 200 at times to me. Like he looks, it's just weird. Like it looks like he's closer to 200.
Yeah, I've seen him in person before, DP, and I believe he's 6'2", right? But like you said, the 210, 215, he's probably closer to 200, right? 198, 200, something like that. Yeah. Yep, 100%.
No, that makes sense. You know what I mean? And I think when you look at what he can do, the route running, nuance, like I think, like I said, I want to see them target Kyron more. And like this past weekend against South Alabama, he had 9 targets, 5 catches for 107 yards. And I'm like, okay, great. You know what I mean? But I want to see the impact plays we saw against USC. 10 targets, 7 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown. But you felt Kyron's presence in that game.
You know what it is?
I feel like I'm watching games that I don't feel his presence enough. And then I look at the stat sheet, I'm like, oh, he had 100 yards.
Yeah, you know what it is too, DP? I think that sometimes he's one of those guys that you're probably going to have to put in motion too, right? Like put him in those stagger sets so he could have those those free releases and stuff you think about, what the Rams do and all those type of offenses. And then you get him running deep overs and crossers where he's just kind of, I guess, segmenting stuff out by levels, right? Like, okay, cool, I got to run, behind this linebacker, and how they kind of creep, right? And it's kind of staggered over routes. And I think that's where he's going to thrive at, even in the NFL, right? It's just being put in motion and doing different things in that, in that realm. But DP, I want to talk about the underrated guys, right? Because I know we have a list of names that we want to go to. I know there's an Oregon wide receiver that I feel like you want to bring up. We're going to talk about those guys coming up next, man. Those underrated wide receivers that are flat out balling out right now.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Game Time has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And think about it, guys, when you're going as a group or as a family and it's 3, 4, 5, even 6 people, you typically want everyone's seats to be together side by side and consecutive. And you know how much of a hassle that is to search through for tickets like that. It is very difficult. That's why you got to check out Game Time. Also with Game Time, they show the views from every seat in the venue. So before you purchase, you know what vantage point you will have. Also, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection, and more. Guys, listen, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Those underrated wide receivers, Keith. And I'm going to go to Oregon and talk about Tez Johnson. And listen, I came on this pod after summer scouting and watched Evan Stewart, and I said, listen, I feel like Evan Stewart has a real shot to be the wide receiver 1 for the Oregon Ducks. Well, that only lasted for one game. That was a one-game thing. And so far this season, he opened up the season talking about Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson is 5'10", 165 pounds, but he's coming off of back-to-back weeks or back-to-back games. Oregon State, at UCLA, 110 against Oregon State, and against UCLA, 11 receptions, 121 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Route running, he's quick twitch, changes directions very well. I think I don't know if I tweeted this, I may have said it on the pod, a while back. He's like the option route king to me. Like, if you think about those offenses in the NFL where your slot receiver.
How much does he remind you of Josh Downs?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I think Downs was a little more aggressive at the catch point. You know what I mean? Especially I think his final year, he was 75% completion on contested catches. He's like, this is a 5'10" receiver. How are you making contested catches at this clip? But I do think he's similar to he's similar to Josh Downs and kind of that Tank Dell in terms of being that quick, explosive route runner that could just separate. You know what I mean? And we seen Tank Dell last year be wide receiver 1A, 1B with Nico Collins until he got hurt. This year is more Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, and they use Tank as kind of, hey, you wide receiver 3 right now.
Yeah, you set this up so well for me, DP, because the 2 wide receivers I wanted to talk about, I was looking for a comp, and maybe there's not a direct comp, but just size-wise. And that's the 2 wide receivers from Colorado, Jimmy Horn Jr. and LaJohntay Webster, right? Both of those guys are like the, 5'10" and a half, 5'11", 165 pounds, right? Yeah. And I think their frames are probably very similar to Tank Dell, both of those guys and Tank Dell. And I wanted to just mention those guys because I think that when you look at it, when you talk about special teams value, right? Playing punt return, kick return, but then also in the role that Houston has Tank Dell, right? As a good wide receiver 3, or like that additional piece to come along. I even think about what Philly did and how they traded for Jahan Dotson, right? To put him at the 3rd wide receiver, right? When you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then you throw in a guy like that, that 3rd wide receiver could be so important. We've documented time and time again how Philly needed a 3rd wide receiver, right? And I think that those guys, both of them, because I think their games are very similar, right? And their frames are very similar too, and what they could do. So I think both of those guys have plus amount of value as wide receiver 3s, right? And playing in a slot, jet sweep motion, orbit motion, doing all type of different things with them. I think it can be those are wide receivers to definitely pay attention to.
100%. And I thinking about it now that you brought Jahan Dotson's name, that fits Tez to a degree. And I feel like Ted, body type wise, where he can win, where he can thrive, and I think you put him in that situation, you're gonna really appreciate his game. And Keith, I got this San Jose State, the Spartans, their top wide receiver, Nick Nash, former quarterback, 6'3", 200 pounds, Keith. He's been in college for like, he's like a 6-year senior this year.
Mm-hmm.
Right now on the season, 50 catches, 637 yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. He's got only one of the games that he's played. He's played 4 games. Only one of the games he's played in, he didn't catch more than one. You know what I mean? More than one touchdown.
Yeah.
And, you know, against Kennesaw, he was 17 for 19, 225 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was probably one of the best red zone and jump ball guys in this class. And he's a former quarterback. I think he entered, I think he walked on campus as a quarterback. So now he's playing wide receiver, and the ball skills, the leaping ability, they trust him so much in the red zone. You know what I mean? Running those crosses into the end zone, the back of the end zone is like, he's got the body control, can get 2 feet down. He's strong at the catch point and everything. And I'm just like, yeah, like this is a guy to watch out for, because one of these all-star games are going to invite him. And then we're going to hear, like, you know, 3 days worth of practice. And they say, no, you're like, man, like that big kid from San Jose State is out there mossing everybody. You know what I mean? And like that's one of those situations where there's the Senior Bowl. We know what the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl can do for a draft stock. It can skyrocket it can plummet it too if you go out there and don't play well. Like, so I think that Nick Nash
we have seen it both
ways, Keith. I think Nick Nash is definitely an underrated sleeper wide receiver that everybody needs to pay attention to.
I like that name, DP, and that's a name that I haven't heard of yet. We talked about Iowa State wide receiver Jalen Noel. I want to talk about Jaden Higgins, right? Him listed at 6'4", 215. And you're looking at what the numbers he's putting up thus far during the season. He just consistently comes in somewhere between, 5 to 8 catches and somewhere in between, right? 60 to 90 yards, right? And just being consistent. And teams like those big body wide receivers, right? Those possession guys, those guys that they can use to box people out, right? You just talked about the red zone. His approach in the red zone could be much different, right? But he's a smooth route runner. And I think that he has value when we talk about those under the radar guys. Once we start getting into that, hey, all these wide receivers flew off the board. And then now we're sitting there in the 4th round, right? And it's like, okay, who are we starting to feel comfortable with as wide receiver prospects?
No, I'm a big fan of Jaden Higgins, and this is a guy that he really does not get much fanfare at all. Like, it feels like the draft community doesn't know much about him, but they need to, Keith, because he can play. And you talk about just steady Eddie, reliable. On in his career, Keith, he's had 252 targets, and in 252 targets, he only has 5 drops in his career. Like, he's so reliable, so like steady Eddie to a T. He may not wow you and flash you and be like the 200-300 yard days like we see from Tetairoa or Nick Nash or some of these other guys. Like you said, 6 to 7 receptions, anywhere from 60 to 90 yards, and probably a touchdown. And it's like, you know what? That works. Like, if you're my wide receiver too, that, especially you think about, for me, every time I see these big body guys, I think about the New York Giants. You have Malik Neighbors, who you are feeding the rock to, and he's balling for you. But who's the other guys, right? Wandale is a smaller receiver. Jalen Hyatt, I mean, I called it, but Daniel Jones and Jalen Holland just are not meshing this year. Like, he's not giving them any targets, especially down the field and stuff like that. So you're thinking about putting Jaden Higgins as like that true X receiver in this offense, and you can get, like you said, probably get him 4th round. You're probably going to draft you a quarterback top 10. And then get him in the 4th round. And now you're saying, okay, I got Jaden Higgins, I got Wandale, I have Jalen Hyatt, and I have Malik Neighbors as my wide receiver 1. He's going to free up things for him, because, I mean, not to use like college to college, but like when I look at Jaden, I'm like, he could be kind of the Alan Lazard, big body guy who can run routes, separate.
Good name pool. Yep, I like that.
Lazard played at Iowa State too.
Yeah, the Marquez Valdez Scantlings, that whole era with the Green Bay Packers, when it was kind of like the end of Aaron Rodgers, that whole era where they went after a bunch of Equinemius St. Brown, right? They went after like 4 or 5 wide receivers that fit the same exact body type and profile. With DP, with the Giants, I mean, and they better make their mind up soon, because they thought that they was going to be the worst team in the NFL. A couple teams said, hold my drink, right? The Jaguars sitting up there, the Browns, the Panthers, they back to doing Panther type things. The Raiders, you have to see what they're going to be. So they better make their mind up soon, right? On which direction they want to go with this, because they have some competition now. But who's the worst team in the NFL? But DP, That wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Every listen is greatly appreciated here over at Locked On NFL Draft. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parsons. And you can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's episode, we're going to get into those 2025 NFL draft prospects that should be leading the way in the Heisman race. Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty, Jalen Milroe had his Heisman moment. Cam Ward has had his. Who should be the leading candidate and who's right behind them? We're going to talk about all that on tomorrow's show. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.